I didn't know the storm would come so fast. One moment the world was still, and the next it vanished in white. Asterisk, that was how it started. One single afternoon, the clouds above Fairbanks had been calm, even welcoming, as I packed up my supplies and left my tiny rented cabin. I was searching for peace in the wilderness. Some people go to the ocean to think. I went north. Alaska had always felt like a place you could go to vanish, to start again, or to listen closely to the silence in your own heart. Asterisk, the road out of town had been smooth, snow-dusted, but passable. I was heading toward the Chena River State Recreation area where trails wound between ancient spruce trees and the land felt untouched. My plan was to hike to a small backcountry hut and stay a night alone. I didn't tell many people, just the rental office where I signed the cabin agreement. I liked the quiet. I liked the idea of being unreachable. But Alaska has her own plans. It began with a change in the light. I remember stopping by a frozen stream around 3 p.m. to take a picture, but the sunlight seemed to retreat faster than usual. Then the wind picked up, not much, just a whisper, but it carried a chill that sank into the fabric of my jacket. My boots, though thick, felt suddenly too thin. Asterisk, within an hour, the sky turned grey, like wet stone, and then the snow came. Asterisk, not the kind that gently falls and settles on your scarf, but snow that slams sideways, pushed by angry wind. It came fast, swirling in white sheets that erased the trees in front of me. My world shrunk to a tunnel of snow and sound, as if I had walked into a dream that forgot to end. Asterisk, panic stayed just behind my ribs. I didn't want to be afraid, not yet. I tried to remember the trail markers, but they were gone, buried or invisible. My footsteps vanished. Behind me, within seconds, I was alone in the middle of Alaska, and the sky had swallowed everything. Asterisk, still. I kept walking. Asterisk, I thought of warm things. My father's old fireplace, my mother's soup, a dog I had as a child, curled against my feet in the winter. The memories felt like tiny embers in my chest, trying to fight back the cold. Asterisk, time became strange. I couldn't tell how long I walked. An hour, 2. My legs ached. My fingers stung. I tried to sing softly to myself, just to hear a voice. It was the only way to remember I was real. Asterisk, then, I saw something at first. I thought it was a tree, but as I got closer, it had corners, a structure, a roofline. My heart lifted. Shelter. Asterisk, it was an old trapping cabin, left from decades ago. The wood was silver with age, but it stood strong, like it had been waiting for me. I pushed the door, and it opened with a groan. Inside, it was dark and cold, but it was dry. I dropped to the floor, breathless. I was safe for now. Asterisk, in the corner, a small wood stove waited. I found a bundle of kindling nearby, wrapped in old newspaper. Whoever used this cabin last had left a gift. My hands shook as I struck the match, but the fire caught. Slowly, the room filled with the crackle of flame. Asterisk, warmth. Finally, warmth. Asterisk. I curled up near the stove, wrapped in my jacket, listening to the storm howl outside. It would be a long night, but I had found a pocket of safety in the endless white. Asterisk, I didn't know then that this was only the beginning, that something even warmer, even more unexpected, was still ahead. Asterisk. I thought I was completely alone, until I heard the Knock 3's soft raps, barely louder than the wind. Asterisk, the sound came just as I was drifting into that strange space between sleep and waking. The fire in the cabin stove had warmed the room enough for me to stop shivering, and I was curled up in the corner on a folded tarp, using my backpack as a pillow. My boots sat near the stove, steam rising faintly from the damp leather. Outside, the storm still howled like some ancient voice calling through the trees. Asterisk, then knock, 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 dot. Asterisk. At first, I thought I imagined it. Maybe the wind had hit the door just right. But no, it came again clearer this time. Something was outside. Asterisk. I sat up slowly, heart beating faster now. Who would be here, in the middle of a blizzard, in a cabin hidden miles off the road? I hesitated, then rose and walked quietly to the door. I cracked it open just a few inches. Snow swirled against the dark, but standing there, just beyond the threshold, was a figure bundled in thick furs, a face half covered by a wool scarf, eyes wide and grateful. Asterisk, please, the stranger said, voice rough with cold. I didn't know anyone was here. Asterisk. I opened the door wider and helped them in without a word. The cold followed briefly before. I shut it again, locking us inside the small warmth we now shared. Asterisk. They collapsed near the stove, holding out shaking hands. I passed them a blanket and dug out the last of my trail mix, offering it wordlessly. For a while, we said nothing. Just two travelers who had found each other in the middle of nowhere. Asterisk. Eventually, they spoke. Asterisk. I was following the river, they said. I thought I could beat the storm back to the ranger station, but I lost the trail. I was walking blind when I saw your light. Asterisk. Their voice was low and soft, like a story you hear while half asleep. They said their name was Rowan, a field biologist doing winter studies on snow hare migration patterns. I've done this trip dozens of times, they said, but this storm, it came out of nowhere. Asterisk. We shared stories then. I told them how I had come north to clear my mind, to find some quiet. They nodded, understanding without judgment. Rowan had the kind of presence that made silence feel full instead of awkward, comfortable, like a blanket draped over your thoughts. Asterisk. Outside, the wind cried against the walls, but inside, the fire flickered gently, casting gold onto the cabin walls. We leaned back, each wrapped in our own thoughts, and a strange sense of peace settled between us. Asterisk. I always thought Alaska was cold, I said quietly, but right now, this feels like the warmest place I've ever been. Rowan smiled. You're not wrong, they replied. Sometimes it takes a storm to remind us what warmth really means. Asterisk. We laughed softly together. It felt surreal. Two strangers pulled from opposite directions, finding each other in the eye of a snowstorm. It felt like fate, or maybe just coincidence. But in the quiet that followed, with only the crackling fire and the breath of sleep, slowly rising, I felt something else too. Safe. Not just from the snow, but from the loneliness I had carried in with me. Asterisk. That night, sleep came easily. The storm still raged, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had found shelter, and now I wasn't alone. Asterisk. By morning, the storm had softened, but the cabin had changed, as if it had been waiting years for someone to return. Asterisk. When I opened my eyes, the fire had burned low, but still whispered warmth across the room. Rowan was still sleeping, their face turned toward the window, where faint light filtered through the frost-laced glass. Outside, the wind had slowed. Snow still fell, but gently now, like a lullaby. Asterisk. The storm was no longer angry. It had grown tired. Asterisk. I sat up slowly, every muscle stiff from the cold night, and pulled my boots back on. The cabin felt different in daylight, less like a place of escape, more like a story waiting to be told. Asterisk, now that I could see it clearly, the room was filled with strange little objects, each one worn, each one quiet, like it hadn't been touched in years. Asterisk, there was a wooden chair with carvings along the edge, not just patterns, but initial small letters etched into the grain, like someone once waited out a storm here too. Asterisk, near the stove sat a rusted kettle, still intact. On the shelf above it, a dusty jar filled with dried lavender, a cracked mug, and a notebook with yellowing pages. Asterisk, I opened the notebook gently. Inside, someone had written letters, not addressed to anyone in particular. Just thoughts, memories, hopes. Asterisk, January 12th. The snow is deep today, but I saw moose tracks near the creek. I miss my sister's voice. I hope she's warm. Asterisk, February 2nd. Firewood is low, but the stars last night were the clearest I've ever seen. Asterisk, March 1st. I don't mind the silence anymore. It's the kind that listens back. Asterisk, I closed the notebook softly and placed it back exactly where I found it. Something about those entries filled the cabin with presence, with life. Someone else had sat here, warmed their hands by the stove, and whispered thoughts into the quiet. Rowan stirred and sat up, rubbing their eyes. You found the old book? They asked, with a sleepy smile. I read it last year when I stayed here. Never found out who wrote it. Asterisk, you've been here before? I asked, surprised. Asterisk, they nodded, standing to stretch. During last year's survey, the cabin saved me then too. Asterisk, there was something comforting in that. This place wasn't just mine. It was part of a silent network of wanderers who had passed through, left behind pieces of their lives, and taken warmth in return. Asterisk, we made tea in the kettle, boiling water from melted snow. It tasted faintly of pine and metal, but in that moment, it might as well have been the finest brew in the world. Asterisk, as we sipped from the old mug, passing it back and forth, Rowan found a small tin box tucked behind a loose floorboard. Inside were small treasures, child's marble, a folded photograph of two people laughing beside a canoe, and a single pinnacone tied with red thread. Asterisk, people always leave something behind, Rowan said, holding the pinnacone in their hand. Maybe it's their way of saying, I was here, and I made it through. Asterisk, I looked around the cabin, the fire, the carvings, the letters, the treasures. It felt like a small museum of survival, of warmth preserved through time. Asterisk, that afternoon, we didn't talk much. We just existed together in the stillness. The world outside remained blanketed in snow, but inside, it was all soft, light and memory. Asterisk and I began to wonder, had I truly gotten lost? Asterisk, or had I simply been guided to the one place where I needed to be? Sometimes, you don't know a place has changed you, until you step outside and realize your heart feels different. Asterisk, the morning stretched softly across the snow-covered forest. No longer angry or restless, the sky above the cabin was pale blue, brushed with streaks of pink and silver. It was the kind of stillness that only comes after a storm, fragile, clean, and reverent. Asterisk, I stepped outside first, wrapped tightly in my coat. The snow was deep but settled, soft beneath my boots. Each breath turned to mist and drifted upward. Like a prayer, I could see the trees again, tall and steady, bowing gently under the weight of the snow. Behind me, Rowan came out with 2 mugs of warm water, steam curling above them. We stood silently at the edge of the clearing, sipping and listening. There were no cars, no voices, just the occasional creak of branches and the soft, distant thud of snow falling from the trees. We should head back today, Rowan said quietly. The trail should be visible again. I nodded, but a part of me didn't want to leave. Something about the cabin, the fire, the notebook, and Rowan's quiet presence had carved out a space inside me that I didn't know I needed. A space where time slowed down, and everything felt simpler. Honest, human, before we left. I reached into my pack and pulled out a small silver key I always kept with me, an old one, to a place I no longer visited. I wrapped it in a piece of paper and tucked it beneath the floorboard where the tin box was hidden. I want to leave something, too, I said. Rowan smiled. Now you're part of the story. We packed up our things, made sure the fire was out, and closed the door to the little cabin, this shelter in the storm that had brought us together. The forest trail looked like a path from a dream, white and winding, bordered by snow-laden spruce trees. We walked quietly, listening to the sound of our boots crunching and the occasional flutter of birds returning to their hidden nests. As we walked, Rowan shared stories of other winters, of field research gone wrong and right, of long nights under the northern lights, and the first time they saw a fox appear from the trees like a ghost. And I shared, too, things I hadn't said in years. We talked about beginnings and endings, about how sometimes the storm we're caught in isn't in the sky, but in our hearts. And how sometimes the only way through it is to find someone walking beside you. By the time the ranger cabin came into view, my legs were tired, but my mind was still, the kind of stillness that doesn't ask for anything, that just is. We radioed in to confirm we were safe. The ranger on the other end was surprised anyone had weathered the storm that far out. You two were lucky, he said. That kind of whiteout. Most folks don't make it. I looked at Rowan. They didn't say anything, but their eyes were kind. We had made it. That night, back in a real bed with lights and warm food, I closed my eyes and thought of the cabin again. Not the cold or the storm, but the warmth. The words in that old notebook. The quiet fire. The knock on the door. And I realized something. I hadn't just survived Alaska. Somewhere in that snow-covered silence, I had found a part of myself I didn't know I'd lost. I didn't expect to miss the silence, but now, even in comfort, I find myself longing for the hush of snow and fire. Back in town, everything felt louder. Cars moved along salted roads, phones buzzed, lights hummed. Even the warmths inside the lodge felt different, controlled, convenient. It didn't carry the same meaning as that quiet flame inside the old cabin. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the usual rush to rejoin the world. Something had shifted during those days, lost in the storm. I had gone in hoping to escape something inside me, but I hadn't escaped at all. I had simply found a softer way to carry it. I spent the next day walking through town, my boots tapping against the plowed sidewalks. I watched people shovel snow, laugh in cafes, sip coffee near the window. All of it felt new, like I had woken from a long dream. Rowan and I shared a quiet breakfast that morning. We didn't talk much. The kind of silence between us didn't need to be filled anymore. It felt full already. Asterisk, I think I'll stay a little longer, I told them. Maybe find another trail. Maybe visit the cabin again someday. Asterisk, they smiled, and there was something in their eyes' recognition, maybe, or something unspoken. The way stories are when they haven't ended but no longer need to be told. Asterisk, when Rowan left, they pressed something into my hand. A folded note, wrapped in the corner of an old trail map. Asterisk, just in case. They said, after they left, I opened it. Inside, written in a neat, steady hand. Greater than if you ever find yourself lost again, look for the firelight. You'll never. As far from warmth as you think. Asterisk, I kept that note tucked in my journal. And sometimes, when life grows noisy again, when the weight creeps back into my shoulders, and the city feels too fast, I take it out and read it slowly. Asterisk, because Alaska didn't just give me a story. Asterisk, it gave me a pause, a breath, a truth I had forgotten. That warmth isn't just something you find beside a fire. It's something you build inside yourself when the storm has taken everything, and still, somehow, you open the door for someone else. Asterisk, it's in the way, a stranger's voice feels like home, in the way silence can heal what noise never could. And in that tiny cabin, buried beneath miles of snow, I found that warmth. Asterisk, and now, I carry it with me. Asterisk, always.